at the original Hatchet film and deciding that we're going to just work our way throughout this entire series, it's time to move on to the first sequel in the ongoing legacy and saga of one Victor Crowley. And we're going to look at Hatchet II. Now, you may have remembered, at the end of the original Hatchet film, we are left with Marybeth on a boat with Joel David Moore's Ben, who had just recently had his arm ripped off to trick Marybeth into getting back onto the boat, and we were left with a screaming Marybeth in front of Victor Crowley, finally face to face at this point, what was going to happen. And that's how the movie just ends. The movie just ends like that. There is no immediate follow-up, there is no post-credit scene, because remember, this is absolutely still a few years before the post-credit thing really got big. Like, this was only 2010, and Marvel had only just started making it a thing. And even at the time, there weren't exactly huge scenes now. But the original Hatchet, which is done in 2006, or 7, I think it was 07 actually, there was obviously a few years difference between 1 and 2. So the idea to pick up immediately from where the first one leaves off at is a great choice, because it pretty much tells you that you got to jump right back into things. Like, if you didn't just see the first Hatchet film, you probably want to check it out again. And that's refreshing, because there weren't that many horror series, both modern and our old school series, that really did that. Most of the time when you got into a sequel, that sequel would take place, days, weeks, months, even years later. And that was normal for us. Like, we're perfectly fine. Like, when you watch Nightmare on Elm Street, like the first 3 films, those 3 films don't happen anytime within days, weeks, months of each other. Like, it's years between Nightmare 1 and Nightmare 3. If you watch Friday the 13th, yeah, there's some follow-up there, and I think it's a year between the original Friday the 13th and part 2. But in reality, most horror series don't pick up right from where you leave off at. Usually, you don't leave it with a cliffhanger that big. Like, your cliffhanger could be your villain's alive. Cliffhanger could be that, I don't know, let's linger on the shot of the dead body here and see what happens. But usually you don't end it in the middle of an attack of the killer is attacking the victim, basically, and what the hell is going to happen, especially when there's no end credit scene. And it reminded me a lot, just rewatching it. And again, I'm talking way more about Hatchet 1, but it reminded me a lot of the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, because that's how that movie kind of ends. Spoilers for those who don't know. Kind of like the original movie. Nancy has thought that she's defeated Freddy Krueger, everything's good to go, there's no problems. Then suddenly, surprise, the gloved hand comes out of the mirror and kills her mom, pulls her back into it, and that's the end of our movie. And Hatchet seemed to have an ending very similar to that. And of course, this came out before the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, but Hatchet's ending was set up in a way to where we just had to get a sequel to pick up where we were going with Marybeth. And Adam Green definitely makes the right choice, who's back again in directing and writing capacity here. We pick up immediately with Marybeth still attacking with being attacked by Victor Crowley. Marybeth is now being played by Scream Queen Danielle Harris, who you might remember from the Halloween franchise, amongst a lot of other films, but she was both in the original franchise as well as in Rob Zombie's remake and sequel as well, too. But Danielle Harris has taken over the role of Marybeth. And what's interesting, and it's only interesting because we scale back around to it by the end of the movie, is that even though Marybeth is our lead, and I said this in my review of the original Hatchet, that, they give us an idea that maybe we're following Joel David Moore's character Ben, but actually our hero, our heroine, our protagonist is Marybeth. And Hatchet 2 makes that very firmly. There is no more fake outs there. Marybeth is firmly who we're following in this film. And they very much take the focus away from Ben, who we assume is dead, but we find out towards the end of the movie, Ben, unfortunately, has not died yet. And I say unfortunately because what happens in this movie doesn't really pan out that well for him, considering what happened at the end of the original film. But either way, the story of this film is simple. Marybeth gets back to civilization, and I keep bringing shit up in the original review, but I mentioned one of the cool things about the Hatchet series is the fact that Marybeth actually gets herself out of danger more than once, and is completely away from it all and can just be done with it, but keeps getting drawn back in. And at least in this film, the whole idea behind it is that Marybeth returns to Louisiana again, and she finds out a little bit more information about Victor Crowley and her relationship to the Crowleys, and how her father, who was played by Robert Englund in the first film, where that connection is there as well too. And she comes in contact again with Reverend Zombie, played by Tony Todd, who again was in the original film too, who is back now in a more expanded role, because the idea here is that the boat that was taken out for the boat tour in the first film, you know, there's a bunch of murders and people find that boat out there, that's going to cause Reverend Zombie a lot of problems. So he agrees to help Marybeth and hopefully put a stop to Victor Crowley as a way of quietly removing his boat from Crowley's swamp, and therefore the authorities can investigate and put anything onto him. And it's kind of ingenious, because basically Reverend Zombie gathers together a group of bounty hunters, regular hunters, the hardest people in the area, to hunt down Victor Crowley, but more so to protect him and Marybeth as they're looking around for this boat and trying to get all the evidence out of Dodge. Now, of course, Marybeth is not aware of Reverend Zombie's true intentions, but he does give us the biggest exposition of the series, which is he explains what brought about Victor Crowley and the reason why all this is happening, which we find out that Victor Crowley's father, Thomas, who is played by Kane Hodder, who also plays Victor Crowley himself, was having an affair with his wife's nurse. And right around the moment that his wife died, he was finally looking to celebrate with his new lover, again his wife's nurse, but his wife wasn't dead yet, and she enacts a curse upon Thomas Crowley's lover to basically screw them for the rest of their lives. And Victor Crowley is born, killing Thomas Crowley's lover at the time. But unfortunately, the downside here is that because Thomas Crowley accidentally murdered his own son, that this voodoo curse brought Victor Crowley back up, and as he searches endlessly for his daddy in the swamp, we find out anybody that comes across his swamp is going to become another unfortunate victim of the Crowley family. Now, there's all these legends about what could truly stop Victor, but we don't know that yet. We're not going to learn about that here in this film. So, what happens is that Marybeth wants to go back to retrieve the remains of her father and her brother, as those bodies we found in the original Hatchet film, and of course they were left there, because how are you going to take bodies out of the swamp when there is a monstrous mutant trying to hunt you down and rip you limb from limb? So that's obviously Marybeth's her reasoning for coming back into the swamp, but she also brings along her uncle with her as well, as Reverend Zombie tells her for whatever reason there has to be a relative here. Now, as they head off into the swamp and they begin to encounter Victor Crowley, we're given a number of more over-the-top, bloody, gory, brutal, visceral, just disgusting murders by Victor Crowley over the course of this film. And Adam Green really plays it up in this one. I had mentioned in the first film, there were some absolutely creative kills, and it's very obvious that Adam Green was trying to make a love letter to the slashers of old, and sometimes those slashers just had some absolutely ridiculous kills in them. So it's nice to see that he amped that up by 10 here for the sequel. There's way more blood, there are way more body parts and limbs and intestines and guts and skulls and brains and everything that you can think of in this series. This is absolutely the series you want to watch if you're trying to get the feel of your classic slashers that you still know and love, but you really do want the over-the-top gore that we've been treated to since the new millennium has started. Because that's really what 2000s horror brought us, it was the uptick in gore. And I know we had plenty of gore back before the year 2000 and plenty of horror films, but I do feel that the makeup artist, that role has risen greatly over the last 22 years or so, and films and series like Hatchet really do benefit from that, because you have somebody out there who's just looking to make a bloody mess, and it's so fantastic. And it's kind of weird because this series keeps its quality throughout the entire run of it. Whether you're watching Hatchet 1 or you're watching Victor Crowley, the fourth film in the series, they're all about the same quality. And that was incredibly refreshing to me, because even for a direct-to-video horror series that's a high-profile horror series at that as well too, you would expect that there would be some quality loss. But what we're showing here, and what we've seen very much in horror franchises that end up being direct-to-video as well too, is that clearly there's more of these being made because there's an audience for them. There's a love for what's being shown in these films, and the Hatchet series is no it's no exception from that rule either. Now, I mentioned that the whole idea here of the Hatchet series, that Adam Green just keeps bringing back all these like horror legends to be a part of the film, a part of this franchise, and really just put all these things out there that are all these like actors and directors and writers out there who are just fantastic. It's great to see them on screen again. And in the first film, obviously, we got Kane Hodder, we got Robert Englund in there as well too. But in this film, we're getting Tony Todd in a more expanded role, because he was in the first film, but now he actually has a lead role in this. But not only that, we also are getting Tom Holland. Now, I know what you're thinking. Spider-Man was in this film? Because that's around the time that Tom Holland started doing roles in Hollywood. Obviously, well before Spider-Man came around, but like Billy Elliot and shit like that. And no, this is not British Spider-Man Tom Holland. But if you're a horror fan, that name should have actually more significance to you, because the Tom Holland we are talking about, or that I'm discussing here, this is a screenwriter, actor obviously from this, and director who is known for his work in the horror genre that includes Child's Play, the original Chucky film. It also includes Fright Night, and a number of Stephen King adaptations, including Thinner, and I think The Langoliers as well too. This guy has had so much to do with the horror genre that's a get right there. That's a real big get to see this guy show up, not in a creative aspect, but in an acting aspect as Uncle Bob. And I thought that was cool as hell. And it's also very cool, again, to have Danielle Harris as our lead, taking over as Marybeth Dunstan, again, from the Halloween series. So she now gets her own franchise to where she can still be absolutely amazing in it. And considering that she did just as many entries for this as she did for Halloween, because in Halloween it was 4 and it was 5. And then you could say like Rob Zombie's films, the original Halloween, Halloween 2. And in this, you know, we know that Danielle Harris, she does Hatchet 2, she does Hatchet 3, and to spoil it just a little bit before my review of that comes out, she does have a cameo in Victor Crowley, which will kind of explain obviously what happens to her character. But she is just as well known, in my opinion, with this franchise as it is with Halloween. And you're talking to the hugest Halloween 4 fan out here. I fucking love Halloween 4, and I think Jamie Lloyd is such an amazing character. But it's cool to see Danielle Harris actually get to do a horror franchise where she can be kind of herself. Not to say that her work as Jamie in the Halloween series wasn't her being herself, but I think the way that especially Marybeth is portrayed in Hatchet 2 and in Hatchet 3 is more akin to something she feels comfortable with, which is super awesome. Now, preference between the two, I actually think I would enjoy Hatchet 2 a little bit more, just because at this point we are getting the backstory of Victor Crowley, and like, granted, I get it, love letters to old slashers, we didn't really need an exposition of story back then, so I would have been fine in the original film not getting that exposition as well too. But there's something fun about getting that. There's something even more fun about the fact that we know that Tony Todd's gonna end up being this bad guy and this just nefarious asshole, and it's like, okay, at some point he's gonna have to fight like Victor Crowley. He's gonna have to fight this guy, so we get to see the Candyman take on Jason. Another just dream fight they're gonna get, and it's gonna go exactly how you think it's gonna go, because obviously if it was the actual Candyman fighting Victor Crowley or fighting Jason Voorhees, that might be a different story. But instead, this is Reverend Zombie, just some schmuck who is trying to fight this behemoth of a serial killer, and you can imagine just how bone-shockingly good that goes for him. But it's a good film. It's a really, really good film. And the thing is that if you did like the original Hatchet, this is just going to be more of that with a little bit more story added on top of it. If you didn't like the original Hatchet, I don't know if this is going to be what turns you over. But what I will say, though, is that Danielle Harris as Marybeth Dunstan makes a much more intriguing protagonist in the film. It's a little bit easier to follow. Not that there was anything wrong with Joel David Moore's Ben. Ben was absolutely fine. But you kind of felt that Ben was just kind of counting the seconds down until he was going to bite it in the original film. Whereas with Marybeth, now that we know she's firmly the main character, we have hope that she's going to make it through another one of these films. So I think there's more to get behind with Hatchet II than there was with the original film, personally, if you're asking me. But that's not the end of things, because remember, there's still Hatchet 3, and we still have Victor Crowley as well, too. And Victor Crowley did so well that Adam Green said that for sure there's got to be a 5th film coming up. So hopefully, now that we're getting to the tail end of what the big destruction that our pandemic did, maybe we'll get some updates on Hatchet 5 sometime in the near future. But either way, though, the great thing is that Hatchet 2 is available right now for free to watch on Plex as well as on Vudu. So if you're looking for a way to check that out, you can check it out. You don't need an account, you don't need to pay, and it's free with ads right now on Vudu. You're gonna want to go and check that out so you can stay up on the Victor Crowley series. And pay attention, because we're gonna get you that review of Hatchet 3 really soon, folks. Check it out. Hey everybody, I appreciate you checking out this video, whether it was a review, whether it was a new episode, whether it was an unboxing, an interview, or whatever else. I want to remind you, you can check out my separate reviews also on my YouTube page, and new full episodes go up every Wednesday night on YouTube at 8:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and on your favorite podcasting platforms at 8 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like and share. My name is T. We've been talking scary movies. Stay scared.